Hi, this is Rabbi Orlofsky, and welcome back to the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. And whether you're watching with our friends and the producers of the Rabbi Orlofsky Show, our friends over at Torah Time, or wherever you watch or listen to your podcasts, because apparently we are on multiple platforms. So if you're on one of those platforms, don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and comment, because apparently those help the algorithms. Haven't said that in a long time. It's a fun word, algorithm. So anyway, hopefully we'll be able to do that. I got a bunch of business to take care of before we get started, The first is, before I read the sponsorship, because the podcast is basically based on the sponsorship, because the sponsor came up with a very clever idea, and that is, if you want to move your question to the top of the list, so then you make that the sponsorship, and then I have no choice but to answer it. It's clever. So I'm going to get to that in a second. But first, apparently, now, I have to give a little background to this also, and that is, it reminds me where Woody Allen, when he used to do stand-up many, many years ago, so he says, well, for tax purposes, I had to become a corporation. So I'm the president, and my father is vice president, and my mother is the treasurer, and my uncle is the secretary. And at the first meeting, they tried to squeeze me out, which I still think is so funny, because so I formed a block with my uncle and sent my grandmother to jail. The point is that, you think, you're going to watch the Rabbi Orlofsky show. This is Rabbi Orlofsky sitting down by himself and doing this podcast, but it's not true. There's a whole bunch of people who are involved in the show. I am just the face up front, but there are a lot of people. We have a photographer, and we have an editor, and we have an overall manager, and we have the producer, and we have a whole bunch of people. And recently, my daughter Yafa has joined the team. She's doing shorts all over the place. Now, I've never really done shorts because I don't have the legs for it. But she's doing shorts and all kinds of multiple platforms and stuff. And, it's her fault that I had to move my shas, my shas that I bought when I was 13 years old for $35. And she says, it's all ripped up. It looks terrible. Move it. So I moved my shas. But that's what I'm willing to do, because I'm only one small cog in this giant machine. Anyway, but they're nice enough that they do include me in the little group where they have their discussions. So I'm on the group. Anyway, apparently there's been a lot of discussions of offering different types of sponsorships. And so I said, was anything ever decided on that? And producer Ari said, do you ever look at your website? And I said, not in the last 5 years, no, but I have from time to time. Because look at your website and see if you can understand what it is. Because if you can't understand it, then we'll have to redo it. So I said, okay, well, that sounds pretty cool. So I looked at it. By the way, there's lots of stuff there. I have no idea. I really should go to my website more often. It's really very fascinating. Anyway, and there's all kinds of buttons and things and different kind of stuff you can get besides just the podcast. There's lots of material and things that are going on and different things you can press. And, well, it's a lot of fun. Anyway, one of them is to sponsor. And apparently, I just took this off, so I think I understand it. Sponsorship rates. For the Rabbi Orlofsky show, Rabbi Orlofsky will read your donation message. That's a regular donation. That's $400 to sponsor an entire episode. For $200, you can help to sponsor an episode. Your name and message will be displayed on the screen. And for $100, your name will be displayed on the screen. So, to be clear, the reason we're doing this is because we need support. And I've had people who said to me, I would like to support the show, but I can't afford $400. So that's why this was put together. The Parsha in 5. For $100, your name and message will be displayed on the screen. And for $50, your name will be displayed on the screen. And for Question and Answer podcast, which we've just started, you may have seen some of them. They're shorts where I deal with questions. $100, your name and message will be displayed on the screen. For $50, your name will be displayed on the screen. Well, that's wonderful opportunities. Now, apparently, 2 episodes ago, I did not read the complete sponsorship. Because I've said many times, we really should have more corporate sponsorships. And apparently somebody sponsored it, and it was a corporate sponsorship, and I left out their sponsorship. So, this is for you. M2 Auto, located in Lakewood, New Jersey, which I know we have a large following. I go to visit my mother-in-law who lives in Lakewood, and I go to visit my brother-in-law who lives in Jackson. And almost any place I go, there are many, many people who tell me that they are fans of the Rabbi Orlofsky show. So Mem2 Auto, which is in Lakewood, here is the number 908-333-6768. This will be on the screen so you can see it. For your best leasing deals. And not only that, anybody who mentions the Rabbi Orlofsky show gets a free damage waiver, which makes sense. Because if you listen to this show, it will protect you from damages. So if you lease from M2 Auto in Lakewood, and I'm speaking out to all my Lakewood people there, please go and check this out if you want to lease a car. Even if you don't want to lease a car, just go down there and lease a car anyway. Not for you, for somebody else, someone you care about. It's the very least you can do. All right, another bit of business. I have received a number of messages from people asking me why not every podcast and not the Parsha and 5 and not the question and answer is on 24/6. And I said, why are you asking me? I don't run 24/6. Contact them. And apparently, a number of the Rabbi Orlofsky show family have reached out to them, and now I have a message here that the Parsha and 5 and the question and answer are both now available on 24/6. So that's been taken care of. A Pesach update. Yeah, I don't know what it is with Israelis. They don't seem like they're in a rush, but okay. But we're supposed to meet with the hotel this week. We met with one travel agency who had to meet with the other travel agency, and they did that. And now they apparently came to an agreement yesterday. And so this week I'm going to sit down with the hotel because I have to make sure that they agree to all of my many conditions, at the same time keeping the rates competitive for people who are coming in, especially people coming in from America. I want to make sure that with the airfare and the hotel, it still works out cheaper than an American option. And I want to make, in the same time, I want to make sure that they're not going to tell me afterwards, oh, not that you wanted this and you wanted that. I want everything. Make sure it's one package. I got a lot of requests. For example, I have a long list of requests. Israelis get up very early. And so on Chol Moed, breakfast in most Israeli hotels are from 7 to 10. And Americans don't get up so early. So I want it to be from 8 to 11. Because they don't give you lunch during Chol Moed. So I want the breakfast to start later and go a little later. This is one of my demands. I am not budging. Yeah. Groucho Marx says, these are some of my most closely held beliefs. If you don't like them, I have others. Last thing is, I received an email. I don't know if she wants her name read or not. Rabbi Orlofsky, I have just listened to your share on the topic of the Atzeres Tefillah in Yerushalayim, and I'm left with a number of questions. I will go from least to most important. Number 1, I'll start with the comment regarding the number of people who came. I find it hard to believe that there were 600,000. There are currently around 1.2 million Haredim living in Israel. Half of those are women. I know married women were invited to come, but I don't believe many did. Of the 600,000 Haredi males in Israel, about a third are children, ages 0 to 9, who by and large also didn't come. So whilst it's not impossible that there were 600,000 people, including the women who came, it seems quite unlikely. So I'm reading you the response to each question as it came along. I'm using the numbers that were reported. I don't think they would lie because they made the bracha that you make when you see 600,000 Jews. It would have been a bracha levatala. And since the din is Safek brachas lahakel, if they weren't sure that they had that many people, they would not have made the bracha. That's my approach. That's why I said there were that many people. Question 2. You say it was a tzeres tefillah and not a protest. So why did they need to block roads? They certainly made it appear like what happens at protests. A tefillah gathering is a wonderful thing which could happen in a stadium or a large park. The fact that it was held in central Jerusalem, blocking half of the city, was unnecessary and added a lot of fuel to the anti-Haredi feelings. So first of all, you don't have to add any fuel to the anti-Haredi feelings. The anti-Haredi feelings are very strong already. There's almost nothing the Haredim can do to make it worse. You understand? So I don't accept at all. But the answer that I sent is the following. The concept of Natzeres Tefillah in an Eis Tzara is defined by Halacha. It's not what I feel like doing. And the Gemara in Tainis, which discusses what do you do when there's an Eis Tzara, when there's a danger, you make an Atzeres Tefillah and you go out into the Rechov. Ad Kedei Kach, the Gemara says that the Rechov has a certain level of Kedusha to it because people go out there and daven on a Tainis. So the correct way to do a Tainis Tzibor, which is a Tefillah B'Tzibor, is that you're supposed to do it in the street. And the third one, my most important question, which you did not cover in your shir, why should Haredi youth who are not in full-time learning not serve in the army? The Haredi leadership has taken the approach that no Haredi person should ever be drafted. What is the rationale for this? I don't know which Haredi leader said that boys who aren't learning should be exempt from the army. I know many who said that if you're not learning, you're mechuyev to go to the army. That was the reason why Rav Shteiman established a Nachal Haredi. And it's also interesting to note that the people they arrested were boys learning in yeshiva. If there are so many Haredi boys who are not learning, it should be easy to go and round them up and arrest them. Why did they have to pull people out of the Beis Medrash to arrest them? So that's not their problem. Their problem is with the people sitting and learning clearly. So that's a response to those particular issues. Okay, that's all bits of business that I needed to take care of. That's our business. Here's the sponsorship for this week. I don't have a name. Yeah? For all I know, it was sponsored by M2 Auto Leasing in Lakewood. I don't know. But here's the sponsorship is just a question. Yeah. Is there a Torah halachic purpose to get married if one doesn't want to have children, female versus male? Okay. So this is a very complex question. The reason I say it's a complex question, not because it's a difficult question, but I mean exactly that. It's complex. What they say in Hebrew, murkav. Yeah, it's made up of a number of different parts. The question is, do I need to get married? And number two, if I get married, do I have to have children? And what if I don't feel like getting married? Or I will add to this question and say, what if I can't have children? Right? So, what about a person who is an akar or akara? Means they're not able to have children. What about a person who's a zaken and a zakena? Who, unless 3 malachim come to your house and tell you you're going to have a baby, the odds are you're not going to have a baby. You pass a certain age and people don't have babies anymore. There was an incident in Bnei Brak about 6 years ago where a woman in her 80s had a baby. It was very unusual because she made a donation to Kupat Ha'ir, and instead of pushing the button for Arichas Yamim, she pushed the button for Zeresh Kayama. So it just shows you, when you give your money to Kippur a year, you better be careful which button you push on the phone. You never know what you're going to end up with. That, by the way, is a joke for those of you who watch the Rabbi Orlofsky show and yet are humor impaired. I know you're out there. We love you. We thank you for listening. But there are certain people who don't know when I'm joking. Now, there are people who are not humor impaired. And I had this story, this lady went to this very, very frum Rebbitzin, and she says, I also go to Rabbi Orlofsky's share, and she said over some of the things I said, and he says, so Harif? How does he get away with saying things that's so stark? So she said, because he's funny. And when you're funny, you can say whatever you want, because people can always say he was kidding. And, people can always have that out, and they say, I think he was joking. Maybe. But this was definitely a joke. It didn't really happen, right? It's just a joke. Yeah. Okay. Parenthetically, I have to say I have received a few, not many, a few comments from people saying, could you stop rubbing your nose? I'm not wiping it. It itches. There's nothing coming out of it. My nose itches, so I'm scratching my nose. Only, it's the bottom of my nose, so it may look to the untrained eye as if I'm actually wiping my nose. I am not. See, I didn't wipe my eye there. It just happened to bother me for a moment. So I rubbed it. But because at one point, my eyes were a real mess. They were drooping down, and I had these enormous bags under my eyes to the point that I couldn't see. I was squinting, and sometimes when I would be teaching, I would go like this, and it would particularly freak out the girls in seminaries. Guys in yeshiva didn't really care because they don't pay attention anyway. But the girls would be like, "Oh my gosh, you have to do it." I said, "I can't see," The Gemara says Rabbi Yochanan, his eyes drooped so much he had to roll them up. I thought that would be more offensive. So I actually went and had an eye job. It was actually covered because I couldn't see. And he said, it's not that you have drooping eyelids, your eyebrows fell off of your brow. They are hanging in your eyes. So he had to lift them up and tack them and then, cut away the skin, and then he cut away some of the bags on the bottom. And he said, I won't cut them all away because, I don't want you to look like a woman. In retrospect, I should have, because since they're genetic, they start puffing up again afterwards, Anyway, when I went for the post-surgery evaluation, he showed me the before and after pictures. He says, now you don't look so tired and angry. And I said, did it ever occur to you that I'm tired and angry? That's why I look that way. It's an amazing thing, by the way, because your eyes get all like black and blue, and after the surgery, So I had to wear these dark sunglasses, and little kids would always stare at me, and then I would lift them up and freak them out and put them back down just to have a little fun with the children. But anyway, let's get back to our topic over here. To have children is is not just a mitzvah; it's a tzivui. Ad kedei kach that the Gemara makes a comparison between people who decide not to have children. They compare it, Parshas Noach, to shvichas damim. It's like murder. That's how serious it is, because you understand. Okay, so I have a lot of children, Kanai Nahar, right? You're not supposed to say how many because it's Nahar, but I have more than 10. Yeah, less than 12. People say to me, well, it's difficult having a lot of children. And I say, yes, it is. It's so interesting that question often pops up in a few different contexts. They say, well, you have a lot of kids. I say, yes, I do. They say, isn't it hard? And I say, yes, it is. And sometimes people say, well, you have a lot of guests for Shabbos. This is an old story. because when my kids were little, it was much easier to put in a lot of guests. Now that my kids are married with children of their own, and when, even 2 or 3 of my kids come, we're over 20, so it doesn't leave me a lot of room. And it's very disappointing because I get a lot of calls from people saying, "Hi, could we come for Shabbos?" And I was like, I have to see if my family's coming, I just don't have room. But we used to have a lot of guests, and they say, "Wow, isn't it hard?" And I say, "Yes, it is. It's a lot of cooking, a lot of serving, a lot of cleaning, And it's not like when we moved to Israel 37 years ago. It's a whole different experience. 37 years ago, a girl would call and say, "Hi, could I come for a Shabbos meal?" And I'd say, "Sure." She says, "Could I bring a friend?" And I say, "Sure." And they say, "Would you like me to come and help Thursday night or Friday day?" So whichever is better for you. And they would come, and they would peel, and they would wash the pots, and they would, set up everything, whatever they could do, and they would say thank you, and then they would come, and they'd bring a gift, and they would help serve during the meal, and at the end they would offer to do the dishes. Wow. Today a girl calls up and says, "Do you take seminary girls?" Hello? Who am I talking to? Where did you come from? How did you get my cell phone number? How do you take seminary girls? I was like, "Well, sometimes." Says, "Well, could I come for a Shabbos meal with 6 friends? We can't split up." So, very seldom am I able to do that. But there's an occasional week where there's nothing doing. I say, "Yeah." And they come. And I have to say that the entertainment portion of the evening is much easier because they all talk among themselves. No one even talks to me. You know what I mean? And so me and my wife hustle and bustle, and we do the serving and the clearing. Sometimes they offer to clear off, sometimes not, And they bring a gift. They bring a box of candy that they sell at the seminary, you know what I mean? And, "This is for you, thank you very much." And then they say thank you at some point, and they leave. So that doesn't deter me. I didn't have the guests because they're helpful. I just, I could see where parents who are sending seminary girls to Israel, you would probably do well to prep your girls beforehand on how to make them more accommodating guests for people. Now, I don't care because, I have enough people in my life already, I don't care, When I have yeshiva guys, it's a completely different experience because they almost always come and they're into, the podcast, or they're into, stuff that I've said, and, and so we usually discuss issues and things like that. But the girls are very happy to talk among themselves, So I can't always do that, you know what I mean? But they say, when the good old days, I used to have a lot of guests. They say, "Well, you have a lot of guests. Isn't it difficult?" And I say, "Yes, it is." And then sometimes people say, "Oh, you live in Eretz Yisrael. Isn't it difficult?" And I say, "Yeah, it is. You don't have family. You're far away. You left your culture. It's hard." And they always follow up with, "Then why do you do it?" The underlying question being, why should you have children? Why should you have Shabbos guests? And why should you live in Eretz Yisrael if it's hard? I don't want to. I don't want to. I don't like it. It says that Eretz Yisrael will spit you out. If you don't maintain the right behavior, Eretz Yisrael will spit you out. The Mefarshim say it doesn't have to be that the nations will drag you out. It could just be that you'll say, "Nah, I don't want it. I don't like it here. I'll go back to America." You think that was just your discussion, and that was just your decision. But the fact is that Eretz Yisrael may not want you. I'm here 37 years. I'm constantly reflecting on the fact that I have the schus to be able to live in Eretz Yisrael. It's a schus. What an opportunity. Is it difficult? Sure, it's difficult. Is having a lot of kids difficult? Sure, it is. Some people say, I'm only going to have 3 kids, 1 of each, Just because something's difficult doesn't mean that it's not worthwhile. And therefore, if I live my life based on what's going to be easy for me or convenient for me, I'm going to make a lot of different choices in life. But if I sit down and say, what's the most meaningful? And by the way, everybody understands this. Rabbi Noach Weinberg used to say this all the time. We've mentioned it in the past. He says, people think the opposite of pleasure is pain. He says, it's a mistake. The opposite of pain is comfort. If someone's standing on your foot, it's painful. When they get off, it's now more comfortable, but it's not a pleasure unless you're a masochist and you like to be hurt. The fact that I'm very thirsty and I take a drink and now I'm not thirsty, that may or may not be a pleasure. It depends what I'm drinking. It depends what I'm drinking from, right? By the way, my daughter Yafa, who's not working on the shorts, is in the process of finally working on Rabbi Orlofsky merch. So one day you can get your own Rabbi Orlofsky mug. And so as you watch the show, you can sit there and sip along. That's the classy way. This is the non-classy way. Look at this. They always drink that way. They go. I had a brother who used to do that. It would get my mother crazy. My mother had migraines. My father was deaf in one ear, so he never knew what was going on. You could sit in my father's lap and put a little kid there, and he'll stick his hands in his food and wipe it on his shirt. He doesn't know. But my mother, forget about it. She's like, everything. She hears everything. She sees everything. It's like, She would come to Israel, we'd take the kids out, and she'd be like, why isn't she eating? Why is he eating so much? Why isn't she? I said, Mom, just look at me. Relax. Don't worry. Anyway, so that opposite of pain is comfort. The opposite of pleasure is not having pleasure. The opposite of listening to the most beautiful music is not listening to the most beautiful music. So therefore, the opposite of having a meaningful life is not having a life of pain and suffering, it's having a meaningless life. And there's no question that anyone chooses to live a meaningless life because they want to. They choose to live a meaningless life because it's easier. Because they say, isn't it hard? Isn't it hard to become a better person? Isn't it hard to, develop yourself? Isn't it hard to do Torah and mitzvahs? Sure it is. And that's why so many people decide not to. Just because it's easier, not because it's more meaningful. And that's why at the end of a person's life, they always wanted to have lived a meaningful life. And that's why if you've ever been to a levaya where they tell the truth, you know how depressing it is. Harry loves cigars. Am I right? Harry always had a cigar and a scotch. And none of these fancy stuff. He was a shivers man. You could always, if I'm picturing Harry, I see him with a glass of scotch and a cigar and the New York Times. He loved the New York Times. He read it from cover to cover. He went through the help wanted ads, even though he wasn't looking for a job. He just loved to read the newspaper. And Harry's lying there thinking, there's got to be something else. They're going to put a box of cigars on my matzeva. You know what I mean? It's got to be something else that I did. Nope, that's about it, Harry. Everybody wants to have led a meaningful life, but they forget that in order to do that, you have to live a meaningful life. So, I bring this example. It's not the prettiest example. It's the reason that I don't always get onto Nucky Radio, but okay. But listen, in the words of Popeye, I am what I am. Yuck, 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 yuck. I have seen women in their 50s who are still doing the social scene. They never got married. They never had children. And instead, in their late 50s, they're putting on as much makeup as their face will hold, dressing up any way that they think might interest somebody, and going out the same way they did in their 20s, while their friends are surrounded with their children and their grandchildren, with hopefully a husband, who loves them, a family that loves them. This is what they're doing. My wife is in her 60s, just had a birthday. Will you still need me? Will you still feed me when I'm 64? I'm not telling you how old she is. But in any event, just had a birthday. She looks ridiculously young. And I figured out why, because if you ever read The Portrait of Dorian Gray, then you know that apparently my wife made a deal with the devil for eternal youth. So after I'm long dead, she's still going to look like she's in her 30s. And I tell you the truth, if one of us had to age, I'm glad it was me, I look in the mirror and I'm just shocked by how many gray hairs I see over there, My beard turned white earlier because my beard was originally red. Red turns white right away, but my hair was brown and then it turned gray. And slowly, but it's a slow process, And now I look in the mirror and I'm like, oh my God. When I go to get a haircut, I'm looking at all the hair on the little cover there, and I was like, wow, some old guy must have been sitting here, but you didn't wipe it off afterwards. I'm old. And I remember on our 25th wedding anniversary, our youngest son was born. And we go out, we went to the Galitzans, which I happen to love the Galitzans. I like it. It has a 24-hour tea and cake room. That to me is great. By the way, so does the Nof Kinneret, where we're going for Pesach. They always have cake and coffee. You don't have to worry. If you need a cup of coffee or tea, don't worry, it'll be there. So they always have a cake and coffee, and it has a nice Hasidic feel to it. And I remember we were looking for a place to go away, and we say which Haredi hotels are available. So she started listing them off, and we said, "What about the Galitzans?" And she said, "I thought you were looking for a hotel." Well, I like it. You sit down, the meals are Heimish food. It was very nice. Anyway, so we're there on our 25th wedding anniversary with our baby. And there was another couple there. And they say to my wife, "Oh, is this your first?" And she says, "No, it's my 11th. And they go, "But you look so young." And then they look at me. And they looked back at my wife and said, "You look so young." They weren't saying it to me, because when this baby was born, I went to the hospital and they said, Hasababa, Grandpa's here. He was an uncle 3 times at birth, you know what I mean? But okay, so my wife turns around. She's surrounded by children and by grandchildren who adore her. Many of them will occasionally speak to me, but all of them, one of my kids would always call and they say, "Hi, Abba, can I speak to Ima?" And I'd say, "Sure," and I'd hand my wife the phone, And I somehow mentioned this to my wife at one point. So the next time she called, "Hi, Abba, how are you?" "Good. How's everything going?" "Fine. Can I speak to Ima?" But you take a look and you say, this is your life. Now contrast these 2 women. Here's a woman surrounded with children and with grandchildren. My mother and father had 6 boys. Right? They had 37 grandchildren, and there are over 100 great-grandchildren. And after my father died, my mother went on for another 20 years, Baruch Hashem, and she made it to 89. And my brothers and my nieces and nephews made sure she was never alone. Somebody always came over to visit. Somebody always came over to check on her. Someone always came to see him. A lot of people didn't have that. I know that. I speak to families. I speak to almanas, and they say, what am I supposed to do Hanukkah? I'm all alone. My children live out of town, and my mother would say, why don't you just leave me alone already? Get out of here. I don't want to see you. That was easier for her to say because there were people with her all the time. When my father was in the hospital after his heart attack, so rabbi after rabbi came every single day to see my father because my father was very involved with Stuckis and with Rabbanim and helping out different projects and stuff. And there was a person in the next room, came over to Rabbi Gottesman and said to him, I see that this man has a lot of rabbis coming to visit him. My husband has nobody coming to visit him. Could you visit with my husband? And he said, sure. He told me the story, Rabbi Gottesman, and he said, because some people live their life, that they have people in their life who care about them, and other people don't. So getting married and having children, that is a priority. A woman does not have a mitzvah of Piri V'Rivya. Doesn't have to get married and have children. Doesn't have to. Why? It is a technical reason. Because when a woman is in childbirth, she's in a sakana. She's in a danger. And because we say, D'rachecha darchei Noam, God's ways are pleasant, you cannot command someone to put themselves into a dangerous situation. And we're very careful on this. Ad kedei kach, that the briskers, right, those who follow the brisk tradition, they don't fast on any of the minor fast days because they're worried about their health. It's a very serious thing. They take it seriously. This nice Beis Yaakov girl ends up marrying this brisker boy. She comes down on Shabbos B'Tammuz, sees he's having a cup of coffee and a piece of cake. Because what are you doing? It's Shabbos B'Tammuz. He goes, briskers don't fast on Tanesim. She goes, wow, okay, I'll get a cup of coffee. He goes, you don't have to take on all of my chumras. But we're very serious about it. There's famous stories of Shil Salanta where there was a plague going around. And on Yom Kippur, I don't know if it was after Laning or what it was, he put guards at all the doors. And he took out a cup of wine and he made Kiddush. And he had a piece of cake. And he had the Gaboyim carry cake around to everybody. Nobody was allowed to say no, even though it was Yom Kippur. We take it seriously, So you tell a woman, yeah, you can get pregnant. The odds are you won't die. We can't command you to do something where you put yourself into a sakana. Men, on the other hand, have a mitzvah to have children, and therefore they have a mitzvah to get married. Now, whether it's a mitzvah to get married or it's a hechsher mitzvah, it's machlekes Rambam and Rosh. But yes, men have a mitzvah to get married and to have children. Ad kedei kach, that we see in the Torah that after Avraham is married to Sarah for 10 years and they don't have any children, he takes another wife. It's your mitzvah period. Today, you're not obligated to do that because Avraham and Sarah did not have any sin that they could attribute it to. We, Baruch Hashem, have enough chatoyim that we could say the reason we're not having children is because of that. Rabbi Tzvi Kushelevsky, when his Rebbetzin died, he married a younger woman, and he had his first child in his 80s. Yeah. And God bless him. He should live a nice long life. And it's always interesting when you have to go to the kids' Chumash party and you're 86. My wife with our youngest son, So, when your kid isn't gone, like in nursery or in kindergarten, you have to go to the meeting, with the teacher. And my wife is sitting there on one of these little chairs with the other women, some who are also bubbas like my wife, making a little project. And then the Ganenet, the 19-year-old Ganenet is lecturing the women about how to take care of their children and proper, child care. My wife's like, Azoi. But, it is a mitzvah to have children. Now, how many children do you have to have? So ideally, it's a machlekes. One boy and one girl. That's replacement. Or, Beis Shammai says, 2 boys and 2 girls. Because period of Arivia, you have to increase the population, 2 to replace you and your wife, or you and your husband, and 2 more to help populate the world. Because the replacement rate, just to keep everybody the same, a family has to have 2.2 children. Now that 0.2 child is very difficult to raise from experience. But what does it mean, 2.2? It means because there are certain people, you have to take into account there are certain people who are not going to have children, and there are certain children that are not going to get married and have children, and kind of things like that. So in order to have a replacement, just to keep your population the same, you need 2.2 children on average. The last Jewish population study that I saw, which was in 1990, the average, what they define as ultra-Orthodox family in America, was having an average of 6.8 children, which is why the Orthodox community is growing. Those who describe themselves as modern Orthodox were having, I forgot if it was 3.6 or 3.8, I don't remember, I'm sure one of my fact checkers out there will tell me. So they're also growing. If you're conservative, reform, or secular Jew, it's 1 point something. 1.8, I think, 1.4. It's not enough to replace yourself. So by the sheer numbers, the Jewish people in America are going to be overwhelmingly Orthodox in the next generation. It's an amazing thing on the left, the progressives, and Hillary Clinton said this in a speech, and AOC said this in a speech. It says, getting married and having babies, that's not what life is about. It slows you down, etc. So, okay, you understand what you're guaranteeing is in the next generation, most of the population is going to be conservative because they're the ones who are getting married and having kids. That was one of the things that Charlie Kirk talked about, get married and have children. So, sometimes it's just a numbers game. If you turn around and you see, what you're able to announce, go with. So, all of this is talking about having children. But here's the question. Is there a Torah purpose to get married if one doesn't want to have children? So, if you don't want to have children, so that's a problem. So I'm not going to endorse that. Let me be perfectly clear on this point. Somebody was saying to Yitzchak Elchanan, they were talking about this particular guy who wasn't religious, and he says, yeah, but he does a lot of good things. So isn't he a good guy? So he looked at him and said, I'll give you a marshal. There was a girl who was sick, deathly ill, and the doctor said she has to eat pig, or she's going to die. And she says, never, I'd rather die. And they said, you're wrong. And they worked on it, and finally she agreed, but only if they would shech the pig. So they told this to the sheikhit, and he says, I'm not going to use my knife on a pig. I'll get a different knife, fine, treifa knife. He shechs the pig, and she says, no, he has to check the lungs. And he checks the lungs, and taka, there's a sircha. It's a real question. So he brings it to the Rav, and the Rav says, what am I to say? It's kosher? It's a pig. So if you want me to endorse not having children, I'm not going to do it. A woman is not mechuyev to have children. That's what you say. It's the difference between a man and a female. A woman is not mechuyev. If she says, I want to get married and have children. But I have asked this question to audiences around the world of different levels of observance. Who wants to get married more, men or women? And they all say the same thing, women. So you don't have to command a woman to get married. She figured it out on herself. But a man, you have to tell him, hey, genius, you got to get married and you have to have children. But a woman already wants to have children. It's sort of instinctual. But take a woman who doesn't want to, right? There are sometimes women who are so afraid they're going to become an aguna. They're just terrified. So I said, oh, don't get married. Don't get married. If you're that afraid that you're going to end up marrying a psychopath who's going to, or a sociopath, could be either one, who's going to blackmail you and ruin your life, etc. No, you're right, don't get married. I appreciate that. But a regular woman wants to get married. Or as somebody once said, no little boy on Purim dresses up as a chassan. But girls love to dress up as a kala. They want to get married. They think about their wedding day. They think about their marriage. Men almost never do. They don't think about these things. They're usually, not really involved. But women think about it a great deal. And they want to have children. It's a natural instinct. It's called the maternal instinct. There's something about somebody growing inside of your body for 9 months that forms a special relationship. And then when you feed that person from your own body and are nursing them, that's something really unbelievable. So, but if a woman says, I don't want to have children, I've been dieting and exercising for a long time, I like the way I look, I don't want to be stretched out. And if it means not having children, I'm willing to live with that. Okay. Nobody can say they have to. Now, I want to change the question. Is there a Torah purpose of getting married? Not if one doesn't want to have children, if one can't have children. And the answer to that is yes. Yes. Lo tov lios adam levadai. It is not good for man to be alone. People should get married. The Bostoner Rebbe here in Har Nof got remarried, I believe, in his 80s. I think he was in his 80s. Rav Henrik Leibowitz, the Rashiva of Chavetz Chaim, got married, I believe it was in his 80s. It might have been in his late 70s, But somebody told me, he saw him, he goes, did you hear? I'm a chassan. Lo tov liyaz adam levadai. I remember I was discussing this with my wife. I said, who would marry somebody in their 80s? And she said, somebody who would consider it a schus to be mishamish, an adam choshev and an adam kadosh. I told my wife already, if God forbid anything happens to her, if I do get remarried, it will be to a nurse. Not a woman who's going to be a nurse, an actual RN. Who's going to remind me to take my medications, who will handle all of my my wife handles all my medical stuff. She makes the appointments, she calls them up. I have no idea how anything works. Every now and then I get a call from a doctor. I said, I don't know, I'll put my wife on. I don't know anything about my personal medical history, but I know that when I was having trouble breathing before Pesach, I went to see a doctor. My regular doctor wasn't there, another doctor. He called an ambulance and had me taken straight to the emergency room. And the guy says, why are you here? I said, I don't know. I was having some chest pain. And, when they sent me, he goes, well, let me look at your file. Oh, I see why he sent you. You're a walking time bomb. You could go at any minute. So you think I could get a handicaps parking sign? I get at least that if I'm going to drop dead at any minute, it would seem to me. Anyway, but the point is that yes, people should get married. And it's a very interesting thing. People who are married a long time, they like to get remarried. They like being married. When, my father passed away, there were a few people looking, for my mom. And she's like, your father was enough for me. He was 2 lifetimes, I'm done. And she says, he left me enough money, I don't need anybody to take care of me. But one of these guys was very rich. I said, but Mom, the guy's very rich. He goes, I don't need his money. I'm fine. Thanks a lot. I'll do what I want. I remember I was talking to him at one point. I said, Mom, how you doing? He goes, your brother said I only have enough money to live for another 5 years, so I hope I make it. And if I run out of money, then there's no point to going on, is there? I said, Mom, you can always move in with me. She says, if it comes to that, put me in a wheelchair and push me off a cliff. I was like, thanks, Mom. But in answer to the question, is there a purpose to being married? Yes. HaKadosh Baruch Hu created Adam, Ish ve'isha, and separated them, Ish ve'isha, and then brought them back together. Well, let's be honest. There are a lot of people who never get married. We know people like that. And it's very painful. Or people get divorced, and they have a very hard time finding somebody else. Or they get widowed, and they can't find another person. Very painful. Very painful. And so you find a meaningful life. Sarah Schneer did okay for herself. She never had any children, and she was divorced, and she managed to build the entire Beis Yaakov movement. So it's it's something that can definitely be done. Okay, just before we finish, producer Ari always sends me some appreciation comments for me to read, just so that you and I can both be impressed with myself. Thank you very much. I am almost 14, and I really appreciate your podcast. You're more or less my target audience. My friend Rabbi Nissel worked in NCSY for a bunch of years, and then they asked him to do an adult Shabbaton. And I remember this was many years ago. And he said to me, what do I do with adults? I said, do the same thing that you do in NCSY. Everybody's just big kids today. He says, I did it. It was terrific. Anyway, and I really appreciate your podcast. Like you said before, this age is around what you said, your target audience, and your podcast. Oh, my gosh, look at that. He knows all my lines. And your podcast really gives me a chizuk, even though I'm very young. Yeah, we all need chizuk. I like listening, and I relate because I also have ADHD. And it's also been hard for me to be good in class, and this podcast really helps me. That means a lot. It really does. Because those of us, I didn't have ADHD, I had ADD. A kid with ADHD, a fellow who's a Rosh Kollel with ADHD, he says, be happy. He says, they just stuck in the back of the room and you spent the whole class going. He says, we were the ones bouncing up and down who got beaten. So I am glad that I am able to add to your Avodas Hashem. Hi there, I was a Talmud of Rabbi Orlofsky in Derech back in 2004. And have listened to his Yishurim ever since. As he often mentions his ADHD, Rashi Tevos, attention deficit, hey, donuts. That's my nephew's line, by the way. Daniel Gantz, just giving him a shout out. Rabbi Orlofsky often likes to throw in semi and sometimes totally unrelated little jokes into his shiurim. I think the hey donuts thing was one of them somewhere along the way. Very likely. I also remember my favorite Rabbi Orlofsky offhand joke was, with all the expensive technology Wile E. Coyote has access to, why doesn't he just buy some food? I don't remember that. During a Mesilas Yesharim share upstairs in the Derech Beis Medrash. Why not add a segment encouraging old Talmidim or just general crazies to write in their favorite joke Rabbi Orlofsky just threw in randomly in the middle of a shir? They're like a spice to flavor the dish that is a Rabbi Orlofsky shir. Torah Tavlin, if you will. Just a thought. Adam Newton, Edgeware, UK. Well, first of all, I'm so happy that there's an Englishman with a sense of humor. Now, I'm kidding when I say that. I don't know where that ever came from. I think it's mostly an earlier generation. I remember I spoke at a menorah dinner many, many years ago, and it's mostly more of a Yekisha crowd, as they say. And I did my usual thing, because I only come in one flavor, you know. And someone said everyone under 40 was laughing their heads off. Everyone over 40 was going, "It's not proper for a rabbi to be funny." Well, gag me with a spoon, as we used to say when I lived in the San Fernando Valley. But I think that's a fun idea. If anybody would like, we'll put it on the website. By the way, I have a website, so I'll add on another box called Rabbi Orlofsky's Listeners' Favorite Rabbi Orlofsky Jokes. You can send those in, and we will start maybe add them onto the website. So if anybody wants to just hear some of my favorite throwaway lines, and of course, if you go watch the Rabbi Orlofsky highlight reel, that's what he does. He pulls out, you know, a minute or two of things that I said. I have no recollection of saying these things. So it's a lot of fun. Okay, that's it for this week. Until next week. If you want to find out more about the show, you can go to my website, RabbiOrlofsky.com, and you can sponsor an episode or help to sponsor an episode. You can sponsor a Parshman 5 or help to sponsor a Parshman 5. You can sponsor a question and answer or help to sponsor a question and answer. Yeah, you can listen to Rabbi Orlofsky theme show. You can sign up for one of my online shiurim. There's a little button there. You can sign up. I just saw over there, you know, for my online shiurim, and that's it. You can have it your way. Hold the pickles, hold the lettuce. Special orders don't upset us. All we ask is that you let us do it your way. As a Rebbe of mine once said, Orlofsky, if only you could learn to use your mind for good instead of evil, imagine what you would accomplish. Until next time, Dovid Orlofsky. And this has been the Rabbi Orlofsky Show.
It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Torah and Simcha, ready to go. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Knowledge and wisdom will help you grow. Lots of fun in every episode. And we don't have to rhyme. No, we don't. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show on RabbiOrlofsky.com. Torah, anytime, YouTube and more. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Torah and Simcha, ready to go. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Till next time, till we meet again. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show.